Okay, everyone, we're going to do Chapter 7, which is Body and Structure and Function. Okay, so the cell is the basic unit of structure in the body. It's basically the body's building blocks. The function, size, and shape may differ, but all cells need food, water, and oxygen to live and function. As far as chromosome and mitosis goes, all you need to know is that chromosomes are thread-like structures in the nucleus that contain genes. Each cell has 46, 23 from each parent, and genes control the traits the children inherit from their parents. I'm not really going to go into mitosis because you can read over the slide. I'm not going to have a question about that. As far as tissues go, the group of cells, these are a group of cells with similar functions that combine to make a tissue. And there are 4 types. There's epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve tissue. Let's see what else I want to tell you about that. The epithelial tissue basically covers internal and external body surfaces, like the tissue lining of your nose or your mouth, your respiratory tract, stomach, intestines, all have epithelial tissue. So are the skin, the hair, nails, and the glands. But connective tissues anchor, they connect, kind of like what they sound like, and they support other tissues. So this would be like bones, tendons, ligaments, and cartilage are all connective tissue. Blood is actually a form of connective tissue as well, and connective tissues in every part of the body. Then we have muscle tissue that stretches and contracts to let the body move, and then nerve tissue receives and carries impulses to the brain and back to the body parts. So the next one is a little more important here. We're going to go over the integumentary system, or the skin. Okay, it is the largest system, organ. It is the largest that we have, so we call it the largest system. Either way, but there are basically here the top 2 layers are the epidermis and the dermis. And as we age, the epidermis and the dermis, they start to thin, and it makes the elderly more prone to skin tears. Let's see. The epidermis is the outer layer. It has living cells and dead cells. It doesn't have any. It doesn't have blood vessels in it, and has few nerve endings. Actually, it's the dermal layer, a little bit the next layer down, that has all that. And the dermis itself is made up of connective tissue, and that's where the blood vessels, the nerves, the sweat glands, and the oil glands are found. All right. Let's go next slide, please. Okay, so the skin has many functions. Number 1, it's a protective covering. It's our first line of defense against infection. It prevents excess amounts of water from leaving the body. It protects our organs from injury. The nerve endings in the skin sense both pleasant and unpleasant stimulation, and it protects us in that way. And it also helps regulate body temperature. The musculoskeletal system, it actually provides the framework for the body and lets our body move, and it protects and gives the body shape. The bone, 4 types of bones. There's long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. The long bones bear body weight. Short bones allow skill and ease in movement. Flat bones protect the organs, and irregular bones are over the vertebrae in the spinal column. Or I'm sorry, are the vertebrae in the spinal column. The bones contain bone marrow inside their hollow centers, and the blood vessels are formed in the bone marrow. So our bones are important. Our joints, a joint is the point at which 2 bones come together, and they provide movement. There are 3 types of joints. There's the ball and socket joint, the hinge joint, and the pivot joint. And as you remember, that was on the video we saw the other day. Okay. The cartilage is the connective tissue at the end of the long bones. So its basic function is to cushion the joint. The synovial membrane lines the joint, and it creates, or secretes rather, synovial fluid, so it lubricates so the joint moves smoothly. And then the bones are held together at the joint by strong bands of connective tissue called ligaments. Okay, get this thing to work. Okay, so on to muscles. Muscles, we have voluntary and involuntary muscles. My voluntary muscles can be consciously controlled. Involuntary muscles, of course, work automatically. So like the cardiac muscle is in the heart, and it is an involuntary muscle. The muscles have three functions, though. They help our body parts move, they maintain our posture, and they help in the production of body heat. Let's see. The nervous system. The nerves carry the messages or impulses to and from the brain, and they connect to the spinal cord. Nerves can be easily damaged, and they take a long time to heal. And sometimes if they break a nerve along the myelin sheath, it doesn't heal. So you only have conduction above the injury. But basically, the nervous system controls, directs, and coordinates our body functions. And we have two main divisions in the nervous system, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system, or CNS, consists of the brain and the spinal cord, whereas the peripheral nervous system involves nerves throughout the body. Okay. All right, so when we're talking about the divisions, the central nervous system, of course, remember it's in the spinal cord in the brain. The brain is covered by the skull, and the spinal cord lies within the spinal column, and it contains all the pathways that conduct the messages to and from the brain. The peripheral nervous system, or the PNS system, has 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves. And some of the peripheral nerves form the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay, this just goes over a little bit, dividing out the central nervous system. The cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brain stem are the three brain. Okay, the important thing here is to know what part of the brain operates what. So the cerebrum, which is the largest part of the brain, it's the center of thought and intelligence, and it's divided into the right and left hemispheres. The cerebral cortex, which is outside the cerebrum, controls the highest brain functions. And just to let you know, the right hemisphere controls movements and activities on the body's side. The left hemisphere controls the right. So kind of anything on the neck up, if something was injured on the left, then the left side of the face and the neck would be affected, but the right side of the body, like for the arm and the leg, would be affected, and vice versa. The cerebellum regulates and coordinates body movements, controls balance, and the smooth movements of voluntary muscles. The brain stem connects the cerebrum to the spinal cord, and it contains the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. The brainstem the midbrain and the pons relay messages between the medulla and the cerebrum, and the medulla controls heart rate, breathing, blood vessel size, swallowing, coughing, and vomiting. Let's see. Let's go on here. Okay. In the PNS system, or the peripheral nervous system, this contains the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. And the cranial nerves conduct impulses between the brain, the head, the neck, chest, and abdomen. And the spinal nerves carry impulses from the skin, the extremities, and the internal structures not supplied by the cranial nerves. and again, they form the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is divided. You have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. All you really need to know about this is the sympathetic speeds things up. So like if you were scared, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, speeds it up, makes you more, your anxiety increases, your heart rate increases, your breathing increases. That's the sympathetic nervous system. On the opposite end of that spectrum is the parasympathetic nervous system, and that slows the functions down. And so they're kind of a check and balance system. Our sensory organs, we use the five senses of sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. All these, the receptors for taste are in the tongue, the receptors for smell are in the nose, and touch receptors are in the dermis, especially the toes and the fingertips. The eye has three layers: the sclera, which is the white of the eye, the choroid is the second layer, and the retina is the inner layer. Okay, here, let's see. On the ear, the ear function is hearing and balance. So it has three parts. It has an external ear, which is what you see when you look at your pretty ears. The middle ear contains the eustachian tube and the three small bones called the ossicles. And actually, it's the ossicles that amplify sound received from the eardrum, and that's what's transmitted, and then it goes up to the brain where we interpret it. The inner ear, though, consists of the semicircular canals and the cochlea, and it's the cochlea that contains the fluid that carries sound waves from the middle ear to the auditory nerve. And they also are involved with balance. So if the person gets into dizziness, it could be because they have an ear problem. Circulatory system, let me get that slide to come on here. Okay, the circulatory system is made up of the blood, heart, and blood vessels. Blood carries food, oxygen, and other substances to the cell. It also removes waste, and it regulates body temp. The system produces and carries cells that defend the body from microbes, and it's through the white blood cells that they do this. As far as blood structure and function, the blood consists of blood cells and plasma. Red blood cells, which are known as RBCs, are called erythrocytes, and white blood cells, which are WBCs, are called leukocytes. Now, red blood cells, or RBCs, they carry the oxygen that we need for our bodies, and white blood cells, the leukocytes, are what help fight infection. And then we have what's called platelets or thrombocytes, and that is needed for blood clotting. So when we bleed, we got to have those platelets. So cardiac structure and function, the cardiac, of course, we're talking about the heart. It's a muscle. It pumps blood through the blood vessels to the tissues and cells. It lies in the middle to lower part of the chest cavity towards the left. The heart itself is hollow, and it has three layers known as the pericardium, the myocardium, and the endocardium. The heart has four chambers. The right atrium receives blood from the body tissues, so this is the deoxygenated blood. The left atrium receives blood from the lungs, which is now oxygenated. The right ventricle pumps the blood to the lungs for oxygen. The left ventricle will then take that oxygenated blood from the left atrium and pump it out to the body, to all parts of the body. The valves between the atria and the ventricles allow the blood to flow in one direction. Let's think of valves are like doors. The doors open, allow it in and out. Basically, the heart has two phases: diastole and systole. Diastole is the resting phase, and systole is the working phase. Now, the one thing and this is where we get blood pressure, from the diastole and the systole. The systole is always the top number, the diastole is always the bottom number. So let's go into the vascular system. The blood vessels, blood flows to the body tissues and cells through the blood vessels, and there are three groups. There's the capillaries and the veins. The arteries carry the oxygenated blood away from the heart. If you ever cut an artery, it spurts. Because it's going with the heartbeat, okay? Capillaries connect to arterioles and venules, and they're the ones who nutrients and the oxygen to go out to the cells in the body tissues, and then the venules pick those deoxygenated and the waste products up and then carry it to the veins. The veins then carry those waste products back to the heart. So we got those deoxygenated red cells that need more oxygen, basically. The respiratory system brings oxygen to the lungs and removes carbon dioxide. Respiration is the process of supplying the cells with oxygen. So whenever you breathe in and there's an exchange between the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, that's known as respiration. When we count, actually when you're looking at the chest and watching a person breathe, that's known as ventilation. But basically, when you breathe in and out, that's one respiration. So respiration involves inhalation, or otherwise known as inspiration, and exhalation, or expiration. The lungs are spongy tissues, and each lung is then divided into lobes, and then each lung is covered by a two-layered sac called the pleura, and that has some lubricant in there to help the ease of as we expand our lungs. So the functional unit of the lung is called the alveoli, and this is where the blood gas exchange goes on, but there's also blood vessels and nerves there. And the air enters into the body through the nose, then passes into the pharynx, and then into the larynx. And then a piece of cartilage called the epiglottis acts like a lid over the larynx. So when we breathe in, the epiglottis is open and we take the air into the lungs. When we swallow, that triggers the epiglottis to cover the windpipe, basically, and then allows us to swallow, and then the food goes into the esophagus, which goes to the stomach. And that's where our choking starts. So when we get something stuck there. The digestive system, oops, I'm sorry, I am ahead. My